Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining our webinar today. My name is Linda Scott, and I'm the Business Development Manager at Eclipse and the organiser of today's event. The title of today's webinar is How to Simplify the Budgeting and Forecasting Process. During the session, we'll be showing how budgets can be prepared and managed within the Infor DEPM solution. So just a couple of housekeeping points before we begin. Should you wish to ask a question during the presentation, you can do so by using the raise your hand function in the GoTo software. Alternatively, there will be some time for questions and answers at the end of the presentation. So I'll just run through the agenda for today's event. We'll begin with a brief introduction. This will be followed by a presentation and software demonstration, and then finally we'll wrap up with the question and answer session. We expect the entire webinar to last for around 45 minutes today. So for those of you who don't know Eclipse, just a bit of background about us first of all. Eclipse was established in 1987 and we currently have offices in the UK, Netherlands and North America. We specialise in providing software solutions that help organisations to streamline processes and improve efficiency. And over the past 30 plus years, we've delivered services and solutions to more than 2,000 organisations in 70 plus countries around the world. The solutions we work with generally reside in and around the finance function, and they fall into the following key areas: spend control and e-procurement, financials, business intelligence and reporting, budgeting, forecasting and planning, financial close management and automation. Today we'll be focusing on budgeting and forecasting with the Infor DEPM solution. For today's event, we're joined by Touchstone, who is our strategic business partner. Touchstone were appointed the specialist partner for the DEPM solution for UK and Northern Europe in 2017, and we work with Touchstone to deploy the Infor DEPM solution. Presenting for us today, we're pleased to have with us Anders Lukianus and Paul Atkinson, and I'll now hand over to Anders for the first part of the presentation.
Thank you, Linda. The PowerPoint slide. Well, thank you very much for attending today, and thank you, Linda, for inviting us to present to your customers around the topic of budgeting and planning. And to do that, as you'll see later on, we're going to be looking at the DEPM platform. But I thought I'd just put a little bit of context here just to introduce the subject about why we think there's a need for organisations to look at technology investment around this particular area. And I think we can all agree that the world has changed. Some of these pictures might be familiar to you. Some may not. But certainly the world has changed to what we would call, I suppose, the digital age, where we're, as consumers, a lot more have different expectations of the applications and the business applications that we use from a personal perspective, and we want these transferred into the business. So there is a drive around technology in this area, and the world certainly has changed. And I would say even finance departments have changed over the years. I think this is probably the early version of a spreadsheet. So I'm sure we've all moved on from that. And there's been some evidence of this through surveys that have been undertaken by Gartner and others, where CFOs are being asked where do they think they need to invest in technology, and it is what always comes up in the top 10 is about ongoing monitoring of business performance, developing business plans and budgeting, and not making it too onerous a task, because as markets get more volatile, as people have responded to these surveys, there's going to be a need to keep up, to control costs, to continually look at how their businesses are performing. And the Tana research shows that the top performing organisations mitigate the risk by continually updating forecasts and reflecting, current business conditions. And if they do that, the benefits are quite clear in terms of being able to increase the accuracy of their reports and their performance monitoring, and allowing them to strategically align their business objectives to the actual operations. Now, I've got a personal interest in this particular area because I turned back in the day when I used to be a management accountant for Reuters. I used to have Lotus 123 that I walked around the streets lugging my compact luggable and collating lots and lots of floppy disks that I would go back to the office to summarize, to total, to aggregate, and then present a budget or plan, and it would take weeks, and was quite a laborious process, and not something I wanted to repeat that often. So conceptually, things haven't really changed. Other technology has moved on. I suppose we use Excel spreadsheets. We email those spreadsheets around the organisation, getting back in various versions in perhaps our with our new laptops or tablets nowadays. But what ultimately happens is that all this information ends up in multiple spreadsheets, and this is, we find very typical of organisations, perhaps at the forefront of their markets from a technology perspective in terms of operationally and customer facing, but at the back end, our poor old finance teams have just burning midnight or creating lots of spreadsheets, lots of tabs within spreadsheets to consolidate up into a budget or forecast or a plan that's never really revisited. And I think we all appreciate the issues and the challenges there are around spreadsheets. Probably around the frequency of errors, lack of audit trail, and multiple versions of the same number. So some of you may have challenges around budgeting planning, and I guess you're on the webinar because you probably recognise some of these challenges that you have around generating your budgets and forecasts. And therefore, there must be a better way. And we actually believe there is, and we improve such in terms of lots of our customers and are using this platform to better provide business intelligence and performance management. So Infor DPM, let me just broadly talk about the platform. It is a range of solutions within one platform, from strategic management through financial consolidations for statutory reporting, for example, and through budgeting and planning and analytics. So it really is an integrated platform that can meet quite a lot of the varied business intelligence and core performance management requirements that organisations have. Today we're going to focus on the budgeting and planning element of it. But before I hand over to Paul, let me just explain the platform itself, because once you've got your head around the platform, the presentation and the demonstration becomes a bit more meaningful. So I see this a DPM is three layers. First is the data layer. So whatever application you are considering or you're looking at, data is absolutely the key, and making sure that it's all in the right place, it's all accurate, and it's all reliable. So the first layer is technical, technical to some extent in terms of how do we connect to multiple data sources to make sure they all come together and then they conform and there's uniformity. And secondly, it's an exercise for you as organisations to understand your data landscape or your real estate, so-called, so you know where all your data is. So it's a good discipline exercise. But the first layer is getting your data right. Secondly, it goes up into the OLAP layer. And what that is a multi-dimensional cube environment in memory that allows you effectively to slice and dice your information in any way that you really feel is necessary to help you run your business in terms of monitoring and performance. And then finally, it's the presentation layer, but it's more than the presentation layer. As you can see, Application Studio is also business logic layer. So where all organizations have budgets and forecasts, not all budgets and forecasts are the same. They depend on a whole variety of metrics and dimensions and elements and values that are pertinent to that particular organization. So this application is built ground up, and the Application Studio is how we create the logic and then ultimately present out into to the end user. And an Office Plus is the integration, as you expect, with Office that gives you that range of solutions that I was talking about earlier, from financial consolidations through to analytics and dashboard, making the application available on dashboards and mobile. And just to sort of emphasize into the flow that will be going on in terms of the application. We have our data sources, it goes into the data warehouses, it's transformed, it's normalized, and then it's then imported into the OLAP cube to give, or cubes to give you that multi-dimensionality. And then you see out there Application Studio is used to present the information how it is appropriate to your organization. And for those of you who haven't used OLAP, this is a sort of a representation of how the data is stored in a queue at intersections. So we have 3 dimensions here. For example, we have region, we have account, we have period, and that particular intersection is the East region, gross profit, and May. So every time we are writing back or retrieving, that is where that piece of information is stored. And you can have any number of dimensions. There's no real practical limit in terms of how you're going to define your budget and process. Now, what that means and what we've experienced is that, for example, a customer here had a Excel spreadsheet, had 40 tabs because they wanted to look at group, which consolidated up from 5 regions that came up from 26 countries that had 8 cost centers within it. So we converted that particular spreadsheet into this one report, and by use of the dimensions, you'll see that I've circled there. You can then select which you want to display, and you have a further element called hierarchies, which means you can have a hierarchical structure independent of your counts or some other way and means. So that's if you like, a very rudimentary example of the power of OLAP. And that means, as a result, we can not only generate reports like maybe that look like a spreadsheet to a certain degree, but also dashboards like this, where you can have a combination of graphics and numbers and links, and you could also move a bit further out and look at using this platform for predictive analysis. So looking at seasonal movements in the previous year or two that maybe help you manipulate and work out a budget going forward. So that hopefully gives you just a bit of a background in terms of the application itself, and I'm handing over to Paul, who will present DPM to you.
Okay, thanks, Andy. Again, thank you for your time today. I hope this demo will be interesting. And obviously, as Linda said at the start, if you have any questions, please feel free to push them through to us. Okay, so just to sort of give you some context, what we're going to try and show you is some real examples, actually inside the DEPM software, to try and give you a feel for how it can be used, sort of some of the things it can do. And this is obviously just a very small subset of the things it can do. But we're going to be looking at sort of a dynamic income statement. It's going to have some sort of contextual stuff there. We're going to be looking at sort of entering some sales budget drivers and things. We'll do some workforce budgeting, and we're also create a new forecast in real time, and then be able to review it and sort of look at some of the graphical representations of our data. The model itself is based around an energy business. It's got multiple business units and cost centres, and it's producing sort of more than one product, in this case oil and gas. And it consists of, it's relatively simple. There's a management reporting cube, a cost and sales budgeting cube, and a workforce budgeting cube in there. On there, there's business divisions dimensions, which allows us to do budgeting at that level. We've got some legal entities. We've got some sales measures that differ for each division, and we've got sort of a staff grading dimension. That means we can take the income statement and take it from a sort of very low, nice, simple, clear report up to a very complex report with some variances and comparatives. We can, from single screen, change what division we're on, and the system will look at what drivers we therefore need, and we'll be looking at top-down work and things as well. So no more PowerPoint. Let's jump straight in. So go back to that. So this is our landing page. Now these can all be tailored. They can look and feel completely differently. They can just be recoloured. It's completely open and up to you. And for me, I like this. It's nice and clear and simple, and I'm personally a big believer in sort of clarity in the user interface. But here we're going to go first of all into the reporting piece, and we're going to jump into that income statement that I've sort of mentioned a couple of times, and you can see that that's it, how quickly we can get there. And we've got just a nice simple sort of P&L that flows all the way down to the bottom. All of the calculations are done for you. You've got no concerns about how people got the formulas wrong or anything else. It's all done for you. Now I can take control of my report and start looking at different numbers, so I can just expose my sort of control panel, and I can sort of start choosing to look at different things. I can choose to look at whether I want to look at particular departments, or I can choose to look at across all departments. I can choose to look at particular companies rather than the whole business. I can even actually choose, having chosen a single company, I can choose actually to also look at the values in local currency. And you can see there that the platform is doing all of our calculation for us. It is doing the calculation from local currency to our reporting currency. What we can also do though is, this report's relatively simple. There's not a massive amount going on here. What we can do though is start to enrich that data, but it's all about trying to make it easy for the user. So we try and help them. So we've got this little option up here where we can do a time analysis. So I can simply click on that, and instantaneously my report goes from being pretty one-dimensional to start giving me sort of a lot of information, a lot of granularity in there. And I can see sort of how my trend sort of is built up to get to my 208 million. And indeed, I've got a spark line as well that's showing me that. And now, having done that, I might want to sort of make use of that information. And within the platform, we've got the options to export. Now, these are just a couple of the options, and we've got Excel, PowerPoint, PDF. And I can just click straight on there, click open, and my report is there. It's ready to go. All of that rich formatting has come down with me. I kept the spark line, and now it's easy for me to distribute beyond just the user base. I can send that out externally through email or anything you want. But we could take this a little bit further. I've got up here as well the ability to choose my comparatives. So I could look at budget finalised, or I could look at my forecast. And once I've done that, I can actually get it on the screen and say show comparative. There's nothing in there. Let's see if we've got anything in budget. There we go. you can see that it brings those numbers straight in there and allows the user, it is all about the user, to very simply modify what was a very simple report into something that really is starting to make things useful for them. And again, I can enrich that further. And it's worth noting here that these menus are contextually, understands what you've already chosen, but we can define what the options are. I can click show prior year. So, very quickly we can build up what started off as a really small, simple little report into something really quite substantial. Now, having done that, I can take this a level further. I can actually click on this number and, okay, it drills down to that level. Now, there's not much to see at that level. If I take this out and show me the time analysis, and if I click here again, now what this has done is something that's really good. This has drilled actually from my summary level in the OLAP stuff that Anders was referring to the OLAP database. And actually it's drilled all the way back to Sun. And this is real, this isn't demoware. This actually is drilling into the SQL so that we can actually see the transactions that underlie that number. They're all there, all sat there, waiting and accessible. No hard work, no painful components, it's just simply there. And all of that functionality is also, that we saw earlier, is all available to it. There's a lot of options, a lot of things we can do once we're in there. And, as I said, it's very easy to export and manage and do things with. So, there we go. Hit click of a button and it comes straight out. It rolls slightly over because it's too big for a PowerPoint page, for one page, but, it's there, it's available. Okay. Now, we can drill in, we can then move on. We don't have to go onto the home page. We can sort of set this up like web pages so that it can flow through. So in this case, I'm now in my balance sheet, and all of that stuff we were talking about earlier, that's still all there. Nothing different. And I can get my time analysis out, etc. and so on. But what we can also do here is that the drill paths can be customized for the individual report and for the individual user. So this time when I drill, rather than drilling into that sort of pretty one-dimensional layer before I got to the transactions, this one actually drilled into balance sheet movement analysis. So I've gone from my balance sheet and actually can see what has made up my movements on my balance sheet. So you've got some really great flexibility in here. And again, I could drill down to the sort of transactional level. But again, what we've got here is the ability for the user to sort of get to where they want to, see what they want to see without much by way of complexity. All of the functionality that we had last time is still available to us. Okay, so that's a couple of sort of simple tabular reports, classic sort of accounting reports. Next thing I was going to look at was just one that's sort of slightly different. Now this is the sort of revenue per day, we call this, but what it's trying to do is trying sort of to look at sort of some production KPIs. And if I just sort of change that to 2017, and there we go. And what we can see here is that the first two rows are not financial values. Those aren't numbers that have come from Sun. They're not pounds. They are actual sort of production numbers. Those are operational numbers. They represent BBL, barrels, SCF, that's cubic volume of gas produced. And what the platform is doing is taking this information from the production system. Now, it could be anything. It could be cloud-based. It could be on-premise. But it's pulling it in, and it's effectively allowing us to use that data to then convert to a standard metric, apply a price, and to actually get our revenue for on average per day. So, the system can do a lot of things, and this gives us a nice indication of what's going on. And we can see here visually the numbers against prior year. So we've got a good, strong sort of graphical component there. It allows us to see that actuals are ahead of budget, are ahead of prior year. I'm not budget on here. And so we can see what's going on. So it's a nice, simple way of sort of visualizing data, but it can be done just there in the surface. And again, it's really easy for me to get this stuff out. If I then want to take it somewhere, I can just click on Export to Excel. And now, not only have I got those bits of data, but I've actually got my graph to go with it. So there's no problem then about how do I distribute it or anything along those lines. So those are some of the flavors we've got for sort of reporting. Okay, So having done that, let's sort of look now at sort of some of the planning components. And first of all, let's jump into the sales function. And what we've got here is just a nice simple screen. And what we're going to do is we're going to come in and first of all, we're going to pick the company we want to work on. So let's just choose company A. So company A, not got much in it at the moment, but what we can do is we can come in and we can actually say we want in May, we'll take 1,000 and then we'll take, let's say, 5,000 cubic feet. We can add commentary. This is a new budget number. And you can see that. And what will happen now is if I come away and go to 2018, but then if I come back, my numbers return. So just to prove that those numbers are truly in the database, it's not just sort of something that's sitting there. Those numbers are there. If I was to put in my price, then I'd have enough to actually go through that $100 per barrel. Brilliant. And what's key to note there, I think probably more than anything else, is actually that not only are we able to store numbers, but we're able to store commentary, able to store text as well. So no more sort of having a Word document that's separate to your Excel or a big old cell off to the right that's got a load of text in it. In this environment, text is actually literally stored alongside with the number truly in the database with it. So there's no risk of not knowing what relates to what or not being able to find it or having to worry about what version is on. Commentary, it's right there, bang with you. Now, we mentioned earlier the fact that the platform can deal with sort of dynamic sort of multiple measures. And if I was to go in here and say, you know what, I want to look at more than one company, I want to look at, let's say, A, B, and K, for example, the system actually has the intelligence to know what those businesses actually do. So I've chosen A, B, and K. And if you look against oil, it's now showing me that, so against BBL, A, B, and K, they both produce oil. Not all oil wells produce gas, though. A lot of them just flare it off if they have any. And it's only K that actually has that business stream. So the platform is controlling it for the user, making it simple for them, making it so that they haven't got to worry about, have I got to fill in this form or two forms or whatever. The workflow, the logic in the platform inherently manages that for them so that they can absolutely make sure that what they are looking at is what they need to be worrying about. Excuse me. Okay, so let's sort of come out of there and let's move on to our workforce budgeting. And so workforce budgeting is something that allows us to sort of manage that really substantial process of how do we budget for all of the people in our business. There's normally going to be a lot of them. It's normally a substantial cost to the business, and it's quite a major thing. And there's a lot of ways of doing it. So what we've put together is just something to give you a feel for one way of achieving it. Now, we're taking the view of, we think finance will probably centrally control sort of certain components, might be the ones that can actually see salaries. And then there might be somebody else out in the business who has to sort of say, my department is going to have this number of head this year, and these are the people, and this is what they're doing. Or maybe an HR function who sort of layers that information in. Some of it could obviously be loaded in from an HR system. But in this case, I'm just going to key things. So what we've done is, what we've established here is quite simple, really. We've put in this sort of a number of salary bands, which we can control, and sort of some measures around those. So employers, pension contribution, NI, bonuses, pay rises, etc. And really very, really simple stuff. What we can do is just literally come in and change numbers. So I could just change this bonus number to 10%. Now, quite why someone gets a bonus every month, I'm not entirely sure, but it's an interesting idea. But what is good, though, is that we can manage pay rises. So if everyone gets a pay rise in April, then we can very simply come in and go, you know what, April, people are going to get 15% pay rise. And as I put that in, you can see those salary bands are automatically lifting. But I don't have to enter it for every month thereafter. The system's intelligent enough to know that if I've given someone a pay rise, it's not just for that month. every month. You know, the kind of thing where you're in Excel, you'd have to keep referencing the same cell, or you'd have to put in something like I don't know, an indirect or an offset so you can pick up last month or whatever. You know, that kind of thing doesn't need to be done in here. It's just sort of there waiting for you and ready to go. Right, so having established my salary bands, what I can then do is sort of move along to the next tab. And again, you know, all of this stuff, as we've said, is easily exportable. It's there throughout the model. It's there and easy to use all the time. It's all done in style sheets. It's not something that has to be set up every time. But what I can do now is I can come to sort of the next screen where I was sort of saying about the sort of HR or operational people actually putting in numbers. So what we've got here is sort of the next sort of thing along, where I can come in, I can actually see the list of my people, and what I can do is I can put them in the salary band. Let's call that, give that person, put that new person in C, let's give them a name. And we can then, you know, we've got some options here. We can make them active. We can say they're a leaver, or we can put them on long-term leave and go that way. And having done that, what we can do is then associate them to a cost center. So let's say that this person, you know, is going to spend half their time working in cost center 222. And as soon as I do that, you can see this grey bit in the middle, which we would probably actually have hidden in this context. That's why we've graded out, just to sort of say, you know, so you can see the calculations. But in this example, you know, we normally have that hidden away so that, you know, people who shouldn't see salaries can't. But you can see it's working out that half of the C salary band, you can see up here on row 6, full time is 1518. It's working out, it's 759. And yeah, I can continue that, and I can say, you know, that person is also going to do 0.3 days there. And so, you know, this works 4 days a week on salary band C. I don't have to do anything else. The system will work out what their bonus over the year is, what their NI contributions are, pension costs, etc., and obviously what their salary costs are. And that's sort of all done, really. Then that's it. And, you know, we can then just sort of flow through and look at a payroll analysis. You know, so the end of that flow of sort of effort and work is sort of just to get to sort of another sort of graphical representation where we can look at sort of what our costs are over the period, you know, how many FTEs we've got allocated, and, you know, visually see, you know, we've got some interesting shapes going on. We've got sort of a seasonal peak at Christmas and at June. Not entirely sure why. Might want some further investigation, but you know, it is there, it's available, and we can see it. So, excuse me. So, having looked at that, I'm just going to sort of then move on. We can also sort of look at forecasts, and again, we've got the ability to sort of adjust our forecasts. So in this case, you know, if I look at, let's look at May, I can bring in sort of 5 months of actuals and the remaining 7 half from our budget. But what we can do here is that we can say, you know what, okay, we've got our budget in. What we actually want to do is adjust it. Now, before, when you've seen me type in numbers, you've seen me overtype. But that's not the limit of what we can do. You know, there's a whole heap of things we can do. So just as a very, very simple example, what I can do here is rather than say, you know what, I want this number to be, what I can do is say, you know what happens if I add 1 million to it? So if I type in 1 million, the system actually goes away and adds that to the existing number, and it'll push it all the way down. And I can also then, as we saw before, I can actually add my comment. I can't spell. There we go. And there it is. And again, you know, just to prove the point, I can navigate away from that. I can come back. And not only the change that I made, but also the commentary that I added is retained by the platform. So it's still there, all available to me. And again, you know, I keep doing this, but having sort of made those adjustments, if I then want to share them, I can just click on a button if they're ready for me to go. So yeah, it's quick and easy for me to share those end results. And if I want to, having done that, I can then say, you know what, look at all companies, look at all entities, and the system will aggregate for me. It's worth noting here actually that if I make a selection at entity level, the system filters down my lists for me, making sure that I only look at the departments that have values in, trying to keep it easy for me to use, so that I don't have to do a lot of hard work. Again, the system's also doing my currency translation for me, so that adjustment's gone through and it's actually spiked August there. Now, right at the very top, we started off in our income statement, and one of the things that we were able to do is, having looked at our time analysis, let's just get some numbers back on the screen. One of the things we were able to do was to look at our comparatives. So let's pull that back up. So there you go, I've got a nice 5 plus 7. If I was to look at March, one of the things you'll see is that there is no 3 plus 9. The system hasn't got it, it's not there, it's not available, it doesn't exist. Now that's not a problem for us. Something we can very quickly and easily deal with is sort of changing that. So one of the things we can do is we can go and create a new forecast. Now this is something that for a lot of businesses takes a lot of time. You've got to consolidate a new forecast with, by blending maybe actuals, budgets together, adding them up through Excel, whatever. Something we can get away from. We can come in here, we can tell the system we want a new forecast, we want to give it a type. I could choose an optimistic one, which would allow me to use my multipliers, some simplistic multipliers. And I want a 3 plus 9, so I'm going to say final actual periods is 3. I can then tell the system where I want to store it in the hierarchy. I'm going to put it onto forecasts. I'm creating forecasts. I can click create version. Now that's going to go away. Now this sort of normally takes a few seconds. Can be up to sort of 20, 30 seconds depending on its mood today. Oh, there we go, 10 seconds, that's pretty good. And that means in the background, what the system's done is it's created that brand new version, it's layered it into the platform and made it available. And now if I come into my income statement, what I'm hoping to find is that when I select March, I actually have access to okay, apologies for that. Something seems to have gone wrong with that today. Should work where we have a 3 plus 9 available to us. So having done that, what we can then do is sort of move on to the other interface. Now, everything I've done so far has been in software installed on a machine. It's a classic application. Everything we've done could actually be surfaced through the web. And you can see here, everything that we've got is available there. There's no loss of functionality. It's all fully functional, all fully working, everything that you sort of would want and need. Oh, look, there we go. Must have taken a few seconds to flash through. Apologies. There's that 3 plus 9 is now available to me. And if I click show time analysis and show comparative, there we go. There's our 3 plus 9 forecast. And you can see that it's coming through nice and clearly on there across the business. So having sort of generated that, we can also though look at other functionality that's available in the web only. So the web is actually richer, and we can actually look at sort of dashboards. So this is an example of a dashboard still on that same data set where we can sort of display our information visually. I've got revenue and operating profit. I've got a classic sort of report, some highlighted components down here. I can sort of click through these. I've got sort of some pie charts going on, and I can also layer in sort of web pages and things. This could be your web page, your Twitter feed, or in this case it's Rwanda, someone getting currency rates. Now all of this is sort of built actually within the dashboard environment, and it's something that sort of the individual user can do using the self-service tools available. So these come out of the box and allow you to explore your data, and it also tries to help you work out what might be useful. So you've got some sort of ABC analysis or distribution analysis. And if you're looking to build a graph, you can actually come into the chart guide and it will ask you, are you looking to compare 2 or 3 things? Are you looking for the relationship between things? Or, you know, are you looking up to see how things are made up? And there's the classic pie chart showing the composition of something. But you've got waterfalls, one of my favourites, the waterfall chart, and column charts and bar charts. And, you know, just to sort of show how easy this can be, what you can do is you can start off with a very simple sort of set of data, and we can sort of enrich that a little bit. Let's bring down sort of year onto there, and we'll choose a couple of other years as well. Select elements, and just a couple of clicks. Let's bring in 3 years, 2016, 17 and 18. Now there's not a massive amount of data there, so what I can then do is I can say, you know what, just zero suppress that for me. So all this sort of functionality that people will be familiar with in Excel, but without sort of any of the risk factors, you know, it's all there available to them. What I'm also going to do is I'm going to bring down company as well. And again, I'm going to sort of, this time I'm going to zoom in. That just means go down a level, drill down, and yeah, now I can see my data. And having done that, I can, you know, I've still got my export to PDF, I've got export to Excel, etc. I can also add it to my favorites. So that means if I'm going to do this every month, I don't have to reload it every time or rebuild it every time. I can just say, you know what, save it as a snapshot and I'll come and use it again. Or I can select create chart and, I don't know, let's say a stacked column chart on this one. And there we go. In a couple of seconds, we've gone from, you know, a very small grid of data to something with a little bit of richness, and I'm able to see sort of what makes up my Q1 revenues or my Q3 revenues in a particular company. And it's all there, it's all dynamic, it's interactive, and can then be used in a dashboard. So that's just a little flavour of how things work. I hope that was useful. And obviously, if you've got any questions, like I said earlier, please sort of hand them through, and at that point I'll hand back.
Thanks very much, Paul. I'll now open up the line for any questions. Actually, I do have two that have come in during the presentation on the chat. The first one, Paul, is from Jenny, asking, can the system work with more than one data source?
Yes, the system can absolutely work with more than one data source. We've a number of times with businesses that have got sort of multiple finance systems or ERPs in place, and part of their sort of desire is to sort of bring it all together under a common sort of global or group chart of accounts. So we can connect to sort of, as an examples, we can connect to sort of any SQL database or Oracle database, any of those sort of things. We can also have connectors up into sort of SaaS platforms like Salesforce, etc. You know, very common, very useful, very easy for us to achieve, and that allows you to blend that data, like with that oil production data that I showed earlier.
Thanks, Paul. Hopefully it answers your question, Jenny. David is saying, you said during the presentation that the system's accessible via the web. Does it also support mobile devices?
Yes, it does. There's a dedicated iOS and Android app which allows you to surface anything that you see in the environment in front of you. I don't know if you can still see the screens. I hope you can. But anything that you can see on the screen now in this web page can be surfaced through the Infor Dashboards app. But equally, actually, just literally in a browser, so on your own machine, on your iPad or whatever, going to Safari. I'm an Apple fan, so that's what I think of most. If you type in the URL for the software, so in my case it's that, you can connect to it and use it as well. So yeah, the dashboards are fully functional. You push data, pull data, you can enter data. So yeah, so I mean, I don't think I showed that actually, but yeah, the dashboards are fully functional as well. So yeah, absolutely, mobile, on premise.
Okay, thanks. And I think there's just one final one, unless anyone else has anything. Probably a more direct question here for you, Paul. How much does the software cost?
I'm gonna respectfully hand that over to Anders. I think probably on that one. If he wants to jump in on there.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, it's licensed. You know, in principle, you have a server and license, and you have named users, and there are a couple of modules. So really, I guess not to avoid the question, but it really depends on the number of users you have, the platform that you're on, and the modules that you pick. So giving an indicative price probably not too helpful at this point, but certainly if you get in touch with Linda, she'll be able to give you some idea around the type of pricing depending on your requirement.
Thanks, Anders, for that. Okay, if there are no further questions, I'll thank you all then for joining us today. I think we're just about 1 minute over, so timing-wise, that's spot on. Thanks also to Anders and Paul for today's presentation. And
pleasure. I hope it was useful.
Paul, I think you maybe have a slide with my contact details that we can just pop up there. I will be in touch over the coming days if you do require any further information, but just feel free to reach out if there's anything that you need from us in the meantime. Thanks.